Hey guys, it's Zerk's What If, and today I'm gonna come in with a new what if. What if Yuji was like Yoriichi from Demon Slayer? Now I know this idea has been thrown around multiple times, and I think I can put my own spin on it. This is gonna be one of my first what ifs that I do on this channel, so if you do enjoy it, let me know. If you don't, also let me know. And yeah, as the story would begin, everything would start off per usual. The only difference here being, when Yuji was born, just as Gojo Satoru was born, the power balance of the world would again change. As Itadori would be born, Kenjaku would realize Itadori would have a weird mark on his head, and his eyes would be almost lifeless. Kenjaku, noting this, would just hope that this wouldn't put a hinder to his plans. But just like normal, Yuji's father would die, and Yuji would grow up with his grandfather. Yuji's grandfather would realize some weird things about Itadori. At a young age, Itadori would barely speak. Even though he was a calm and respectful kid, Yuji would show barely any type of emotion at all. Growing up, Yuji would also tell his grandfather that he could see weird things, those being of course curses. But Yuji also realized as long as he didn't mess with them, they didn't mess with him. So over time, he would get used to them. He would also tell his grandfather that he saw the world differently. Every single minuscule movement that his grandfather did, Yuji could see. From his lungs expanding to his muscles contracting, Yuji could see all of it. Although Yuji's grandfather would just want a normal life for Yuji, it would be clear that Yuji was far from normal, and his life would be far from normal. With Yuji's grandfather just asking Yuji to live a normal life, he would abide by his grandfather's wishes. Even though he could see curses and also interact with them, he would just live normal as per his grandfather's wishes. This is where we time skip to the regular JJK story. As Yuji would grow up, he would take a liking to swordsmanship. Throughout middle school and high school, he would begin taking kendo classes, seeming to be absolutely untouched by anyone. And from time to time, he would hang out with his friends from the occult club. Every other day, Yuji would go and see his grandfather, who was bedridden in the hospital. In high school, Yuji was pretty popular, as he would still have the nickname the Tiger of West Junior High. Everybody noting that Yuji was incredibly strong and incredibly fast, with Yuji being even stronger and faster than he was in canon, thanks to his Demon Slayer mark. People always thought Yuji was cool because he had the mark on his forehead, pointing it out, while others would call him a freak. But again, he didn't care. On this particular day, Yuji would be hanging out with his friends from the occult club, as they told Yuji that they would be heading back later tonight to the school to unwrap some weird creepy object. Yuji, looking at the object, could feel the malice around it and would tell them that it probably wasn't a good idea. Them laughing at Yuji, asking him if he was scared, with Yuji simply warning them again that it probably wouldn't be a good idea. With his friends continuously clowning him, trying to call him scared, as he would ignore them, he would tell them that he was going to go see his grandfather since he was sickly in bed. With them still making fun of Yuji, Yuji would simply leave. This is where Yuji would walk past Megumi. Megumi was there to investigate a special grade cursed object. As he would pass Yuji, he would notice Yuji's peculiar mark on his forehead. And as Yuji would walk past him, he would notice the faint cursed energy of the special grade object on Yuji. As Megumi would try to stop Yuji, Yuji would already be down the street by time, noting that he was insanely fast, and that was without cursed energy. Yuji getting to the hospital, his grandfather would reprimand him about coming there and not spending time with his friends. Yuji telling his grandfather to not get on his case about it. Yuji just wants to live a quiet life and be there for his grandfather just as he was there for him. This is where Yuji's grandfather would turn over and tell him that he's a very good kid, and he understands that Yuji just wants to live a quiet life. However, he needs to make as many friends as he can and die surrounded by the people that he loves. He would tell Yuji to not be like him, to use his strength to help people, and to die surrounded by loved ones, and not end up alone like him. Yuji, hearing these words, would take them to heart. But the entire time Yuji hearing these words, he would also be hearing his grandfather's heart come to a stop. And for the first time in Yuji's life, he would start crying, calling the nurse on the phone and telling them that his grandfather had passed away. After Yuji would finish mourning, he would pack up his things and go down to the lobby to fill out some paperwork. This is where Megumi would come into the hospital and introduce himself to Yuji. Asking to talk to Yuji, he would politely decline, saying that he is in mourning and he would like alone time. Megumi saying that this was an important matter, He would ask Yuji if he had seen a cursed object. Megumi had been looking for it, and it's extremely dangerous to just be out and about. Yuji noting that his friends at the occult club had a box that had some weird energy to it. He told Megumi that they'd be opening it up at the school later tonight. This is where Megumi would tell Yuji that his friends are in extreme danger, and that's the worst case scenario. Yuji, taken aback by his grandfather's words still, would ask Megumi to join him in helping his friends, as Megumi would tell him it was way too dangerous for someone like him, as there were forces at work that Yuji couldn't possibly understand, with Yuji telling Megumi that if it's about those weird things that walk around, he sees them all the time, and he just doesn't mess with them. Megumi being surprised that this kid could see cursed spirits, even without cursed energy. Not really wanting Yuji to come, he would reluctantly agree. As Megumi and Yuji would finally get to the school, they would feel the malice coming from the school. Megumi noting that the special grade object that his friends had unwrapped had attracted other types of spirits here. Megumi would immediately rush into the school, trying to contain the cursed spirits that were there. Despite knowing that he had to help the people that were in, Yuji would stand outside for a little bit, contemplating everything, knowing that when he stepped through these doors, his life would probably change drastically. Remembering on his grandfather's words, he would remember exactly what he says, to use his strength and to help people. Yuji would steel his resolve, and just like in the regular anime, just as the cursed spirit was about to take the finger, Yuji would burst through the window with his kendo sword in hand. With 3 swift movements, he would attack the cursed spirit and grab both his friends, with Megumi finishing off the cursed spirit with his demon dogs, noting to Yuji that he was incredibly strong, even without using cursed energy, telling Yuji that it was amazing to him how he could see the cursed spirits but not utilize any type of cursed energy. This is where Yuji would grab the finger from his friends, looking at it, calling it grotesque. As he would be about to hand the finger off to Megumi, a cursed spirit would crash through the roof, with Megumi pushing Yuji out the way. Attempting to summon Nue, he would get slammed into the wall and tossed outside. As the finger would be flown into the air, the cursed spirit would try to grab it, with Yuji immediately butting in, with Megumi out of commission, and Yuji the only person there, not actually being able to do anything to the curse without cursed energy. They would be at a stalemate. Even though Yuji was much faster and stronger than the curse, he couldn't do much. So Yuji only thought of one plausible option. You said I need cursed energy to kill the curse, right? Well, what would happen if I ate this? Megumi yelling at Yuji to not do it. As the curse would begin to lunge at Yuji, Yuji would have swallowed the finger, as immediately, Yuji would begin to get markings on his body, and with one swipe of his hand, the curse would be evaporated into smithereens. Megumi noting that this is the worst possible outcome. It's only a 1 in 1 million chance, but it still happened. The reincarnation of Ryomen Sukuna, as Sukuna would rip off his shirt and talk about how it was nice to finally be outside again. He had finally been reawoken, and he could not wait to satiate his bloodlust. But just as Sukuna would think he had control, Yuji would then say, "Give me my body back." With Sukuna being confused, Yuji would grab his own face, Sukuna asking him, why is he talking? How is he talking? With Yuji saying, well, it's my body. As the markings would disappear, but Megumi himself couldn't tell who was actually in control. Megumi would prepare to summon a Shikigami, and he would tell Yuji, under Jujutsu regulation, he will now exercise the cursed Yuji Itadori. As Megumi would be about to summon his Shikigami, Gojo would stop him. He would laugh and ask Megumi what was going on here. Megumi would then explain the entire situation to him, about how Yuji swallowed a special grade object and now has a special grade cursed user, Ryomen Sukuna, inside of him. Gojo would burst out laughing, asking him seriously, to where he would get in Yuji's face and stare him down, analyzing him, noticing a lot of peculiar things about him. How not only Yuji's cursed energy was immense, his eyes were special just like his. He would be shocked, saying, wow, this kid is crazy. It's no wonder that you were able to get Sukuna under your control. This is where Yuji would say he doesn't know what he did. He just knows that the guy tried to take over his body, and that he took back control when he was trying. This is where Gojo would ask Yuji if he thinks if he can transform back. Yuji asking Gojo what he means, with Gojo saying, transforming back into Sukuna, of course. Just give me and him 10 seconds. Do you think you can do that? Yuji saying he thinks that's possible. Gojo getting ready to stretch, as Yuji would then give full access to Sukuna. As Sukuna, without hesitation, being even faster than canon, he would go for an attack on Gojo, with Gojo dodging, noting how fast the King of Curses was. But since his student was there, he had to show off a little. The fight would go as regular, but with Sukuna putting up a lot more of a fight. Sukuna noting that this body that he was in was absolutely marvelous, and that he couldn't wait to take it over and make it his completely. With the 10 seconds being over, Yuji would then retake control of his body, with Gojo laughing, saying, "Wow, you really can do it." This is where he would then knock out Itadori. He would proceed to tell Megami that things were about to get a lot more interesting now. This is where then Yuji would wake up. He would be inside a room with seals, bound to a chair, but Gojo would tell him about how he was supposed to be executed, but Gojo had his sentence suspended. He would proceed to tell Yuji that he had two options. As a potential vessel for Sukuna, he could either die now or consume all 20 fingers and then die. And the choice was all his. Yuji being conflicted. After all, he just wanted to live a normal life. He would understand what had to be done after this day. He would tell Gojo, per his grandfather's wishes, that he would eat all 20 fingers and then die. If it helped save as many people as he could, he wouldn't hesitate not once to do it. After the whole incident, Yuji would then revisit his friends. With one of his friends being bedridden, he would explain to them everything that happened to the best of his capabilities, telling them that they probably won't see each other for a while, but he'll come and visit as much as he can. Yuji would walk outside the hospital and meet up with Gojo. He would then ask Gojo if there are many casualties involving curses, and Gojo would tell him that in his case, this was probably the best case scenario when it involves cases. Most people are lucky to die a normal death after encountering a curse. As then again, Yuji would then think about how he wanted to go about this. They would go to the morgue, where Yuji would collect his grandfather's ashes. This is where Gojo again would ask him if this is what he really wanted to do. Yuji would think back on everything, on his grandfather's words, on the events that happened that day, realizing that no matter what happens from now, he'll do his best to protect the people that he loves and make as many friends as he can before he has to die. He'll live life his own way, just as his grandfather wanted. This is where Gojo will present Yuji the second finger and tell him to swallow it. Yuji taking the finger and scarfing it down with no problem at all. As Yuji would follow the finger, Gojo would wait for something to happen. But however, Yuji would not even struggle in this timeline, simply eating the finger as if it was a fruit snack, not showing any type of emotion or anything on his face. This is where Gojo would tell Yuji they haven't seen someone like him in thousands of years. Gojo would tell Yuji to pack his bags. As Yuji would ask where they're going, Megami would enter the room, telling Yuji exactly where they're going. As a little time would pass, Gojo and Yuji would finally get to the Tokyo Jujutsu School. Gojo would then tell Yuji that he is one of the 3 new freshmen that will be entering Jujutsu High School. But before Yuji can actually be accepted into the school, he has to do an interview with the principal. This is where Gojo would tell Yuji that the principal has the final say and can order Yuji's execution outright. As Gojo and Yuji would arrive to the principal's office, this is where they see Principal Yaga. Yuji would then introduce himself to Principal Yaga. This is where Yaga would ask him why he wants to enroll into Jujutsu Tech. Yuji would explain to Yaga that per his grandfather's wishes, he just wants to help people. Principal Yaga being unsatisfied with Yuji's answer, he would activate his cursed corpse. Yuji staring at the doll would notice weird energy coming off of it immediately. As Principal Yaga would send the cursed corpse towards Yuji, Yuji would grab the doll, and he would keep the doll under control effortlessly. This shocking both Yaga and Gojo. Gojo realizing this earlier, especially when Yuji ate the second finger. Not only did Yuji barely show any expression, but when he was fighting the cursed spirit with Megami, he was damn near on par with Megami, if not a little better. And that was without curse energy. Yuji would then explain to Principal Yaga that he understands that he's here based off someone else's wishes, but still, he wants to be a good person and live a good life, to save as many people as he can. Even though his grandfather had wished for him to do that, it was also by his own ideals. Principal Yaga, seeing Yuji barely have any emotion, would tell him, "Sorcerers must be highly motivated and a little crazy, and you don't seem like you're all there. You just might be the perfect person for this. Tell me exactly what you want to do here at Jujutsu High." This is when Principal Yaga would then activate 3 more dolls in the back. With the dolls rushing Yuji, Yuji would again easily dodge. While dodging, he would answer Principal Yaga, telling him that he does not want to live with any kind of regrets. He just wants to be able to live to the best of his abilities, even though he'll be executed. He wants to be able to live the way that he's always wanted to live, saving people and making as many friends as he can along the way, even while doing that as a Jujutsu sorcerer. As Yaga would hear Yuji, he would deactivate his clones. taking it for an answer, telling him, "Welcome to Jujutsu High." After everything was said and done, Gojo would take Yuji to his dorm and ask him if he's ready to fight, telling him about how Yuji can be both used as a vessel and a locator for the other fingers. As Yuji doesn't have the same attitude as he has in canon, Megumi wouldn't be so disappointed that Yuji was going to be living so close. Megumi kind of liked Yuji a lot more since he had somewhat of the same kind of personality as he had. This is when Gojo would announce that they're going to go pick up the third first-year student. He would then tell them to meet him at the station in Harajuku. As all three of them would arrive at the station, Yuji and Megumi would be waiting to meet up with the third first year. Yuji would then begin to ask questions, asking why there's only 3 first years at the school. Megumi telling him that Jujutsu students are pretty rare. Gojo would then arrive, complimenting Yuji's uniform. Yuji's outfit in this timeline looking something like Naoya's outfit, just being all black with hints of red, while Yuji would also carry his kendo sword, even though it wasn't actually real. This is when the new third year student would arrive. Gojo would call her out, and she'd be freaked out by Gojo. After putting her things in a locker, she would then turn around and introduce herself, this being Nobara Kugasaki, telling both Yuji and Megumi that they were lucky to have her as the woman of their group. Yuji would then introduce himself back to Nobara, with Yuji being extremely kind and modest. Instead of her being unimpressed by Yuji in this time, she'd actually be taken aback by his kindness and manners, with still being absolutely unimpressed by Megumi, calling him plain and boring. This is where Gojo would be saying they'll be taking a tour of Tokyo since they're all together for the first time, with Nobara being the only one in the group that would get excited. But as quickly as she'd get excited, she'd be disappointed when Gojo brings them to an abandoned building. Yuji, just feeling the malice off of the building, would ask, why do cursed spirits tend to group up in places like these? Megumi explaining to him how associating fear with cemeteries is how curses can be brought about, with Gojo also explaining to Yuji that curses are physical manifestations of negative human emotions, with Yuji understanding almost instantly. Nobara would interrupt the group, asking, how is it that a Jujutsu student doesn't know what any of this is already? With both Megumi and Gojo telling Nobara that Yuji only started at Jujutsu Tech not too long ago and just recently started delving into curses. This is where Yuji would then explain to them that he's seen curses his entire life. He just thought it was a side effect from his weird eyes. Kugisaki would then ask what does Yuji mean, with Gojo's ears also perking up. He would then explain to the group that his eyes give him access to something that he calls a transparent world. Ever since his birth, he's been able to see things weirdly. It was scary when he was younger, but over time he just got used to it. He would tell them, as for instance right now, he could see them breathing, every movement that they make. It's almost as if he can see people's movement before they even make it. Looking at a person's muscles and seeing the way they move gives him a chance to react and know what they're going to do before they even get a chance to do it. This is where Gojo would get in front of Yuji's face again and just call him interesting. This is where Yuji would then also point out to Gojo that he knows his eyes are weird too. This is where Gojo would laugh, and then he'd tell Nobara and Yuji that it was time for them to take their test. Gojo looking at Yuji's weapon, he would tell him that that weapon would probably not work on curses. This is where he'd hand Yuji the Slaughter Demon. He would tell Yuji that it's a weapon that's already been imbued with curse energy. He also tells Yuji to not let Sukuna out once during this trial. Yuji nodding his head and agreeing. They would both enter the building together. Megumi would try to join, but Gojo would tell him not to, saying that this is really just a test for Nobara. As they enter the building, Nobara would begin asking Yuji all types of questions about why he doesn't know much about Jujutsu and what's with his weird eyes and stuff. Can he see through her clothes or something like that? With him saying no, and even if he could, he wouldn't. With her getting pissed off, going, what do you mean by that? Storming upstairs. Yuji wondering what he said wrong there. This is where a cursed spirit would suddenly ambush Yuji from above. With him being even faster than in the original, he would easily dodge the cursed spirit, and in one quick motion, Yuji would slice the cursed spirit in half. As Nobara would begin to head upstairs, she'd enter a room. Inside the room, there'd be nothing but a bunch of mannequins sitting in there. She would call out the cursed spirit, saying she knows it's there, and shooting her nail inside the cursed spirit's head. This is when Nobara would say, you don't want that in there for too long. This is where we'd see Nobara's curse technique, with her using hairpin. As she finishes off the cursed spirit, she'd see a little kid come out from the back. She'd tell the little kid to come here, with the little kid saying no, and her getting offended. This is where another curse would come out and grab the kid, taking the kid hostage. She'd be torn on what to do. This is from when out of nowhere, behind the cursed spirit, the wall behind him would get sliced, being cut into multiple pieces, as the curse would try to stab the little kid. Yuji, before the curse even had a chance to move his hand, Yuji would proceed to slice the curse in 10 different parts, exercising it before Kugisaki even had the chance to. With Nobara freaking out, asking Yuji how the hell did he slice through a wall that thick, with him saying the wall wasn't that hard to slice. She would just be completely baffled by the fact that this kid was able to slice through a wall like it was butter. As they would be done with the mission, Gojo would proceed to take all the students back to Jujutsu High. He would then ask Yuji to follow him for a bit. With Gojo noticing Yuji still practiced with his kendo sword, he would take Yuji to the school's armory, where there would be tons of cursed weapons there, with him telling Yuji to pick out a weapon that was suitable for him. This is where Yuji would see a black blade sitting there in the corner. It looked like it had been there for years, unused and unwanted. But when Yuji saw it, it was like something had attracted him to it, telling Gojo that he wanted that sword right there. Gojo, being confused on why Yuji wanted this plain worn out sword, wouldn't question it and just give Yuji the sword, telling Yuji that even though the weapon was just a plain old sword, knowing him, he could probably do something with it. This is where Gojo would then proceed to explain cursed energy to Yuji, telling him that it comes from the negative energy from inside his body. Yuji would understand what he means immediately, but it'd be hard to put into play for him. Yuji's abilities would be off the charts, but he wouldn't know how to use cursed energy. But Gojo knew when Yuji was finally able to utilize his cursed energy, he'd be a problem for sure. This is where Gojo would then tell Yuji that he has an important mission to go to, so if anything happened while he was gone, he'd leave everything up to Yuji, with Yuji nodding reluctantly. As Gojo would be gone, this is when people would start to report about some weird thing flying in the sky near some juvenile detention center. With Gojo being gone, Yoriichi would then send the first years, telling them that the only reason that they're there is to investigate. Yuji would then ask, because he heard about it earlier with Megami, asking what is a special grade, with Yoriichi explaining all the grades of the curses. Yoriichi would then tell them that if they do encounter a special grade spirit, their only options are to run or die. As they head inside the detention center, everything around them would change, and Megami would tell the group that they've entered the curse's innate domain. With Nobara beginning to panic, Yuji would ask what would they do now. This is where Megami states that his white divine dog will be able to smell any threats, and as long as they stay close to the dog, nothing will happen. As the trio moves out to find anybody trapped inside, they eventually come across the mutilated body. Yuji, seeing this, would note that this might be the son of the lady that was outside crying. Megami would lift up the name tag on the shirt and confirm that it was the kid that she was crying about. As Yuji would understand exactly what would happen if these cursed spirits were left to live, his resolve to save people would only get stronger. And as they tried to plan out their next move, Nobara, being annoyed because she doesn't know what to do, would then suddenly be dragged through the floor by a curse, with both Yuji and Megami staring, confused and surprised. This is when the special grade cursed spirit would show up, but before either the cursed spirit or Megami could think, Yuji would already be slashing his sword at the cursed spirit, with the cursed spirit barely dodging in time. Yuji would then tell Megami that he needs to find Kugisaki and they all need to escape. This is where Megami would tell Yuji that he's not going to leave him behind. But then Yuji would tell Megami if they both die here, then it'll be for nothing. He needs to find Kugisaki, and he'll catch up with him later. With Yuji saying this, Megami would look at his face and see nothing but determination, with Megami reluctantly agreeing and turning around to go try to find Kugisaki, questioning himself in his head how Yuji in this current moment is unafraid and unnerved by this special grade cursed spirit. As the fight would begin between Yuji and the cursed spirit, Yuji wouldn't waste any time. Before the cursed spirit could even get a chance to think, Yuji was already slashing down at the cursed spirit again. The cursed spirit again barely dodging out the way. The cursed spirit would try to counterattack, but again, Yuji was just too fast for him. Yuji not once in his life had ever gone all out, but seeing how dire the situation was, he knew that he couldn't hold back here. Yuji, knowing he still didn't know how to utilize cursed energy, so no matter what he did to this cursed spirit, it wouldn't matter. He knew that he either needed to stall out for time or learn how to use cursed energy right here and right now. Thinking back on what Gojo said and what Megami said, saying that cursed energy is simply generated from negative emotion. Yuji thinking back on everything that's gotten him to this moment. Thinking on how his grandfather died and the words that he left with him. Thinking on the people here that died for simply nothing. Thinking on how many more people might die if he doesn't do something right now. This is where Yuji would then undergo a transformation.
Something in Yuji's brain would then unlock.
Unbeknownst to Yuji or any of his classmates, Yuji had a technique his entire life. He just wasn't able to access it due to not being able to use cursed energy. But the second Yuji felt that flare of cursed energy, It was like something had clicked instantly for Yuji. As the cursed spirit would notice Yuji's unfathomable cursed energy, he would try to gain some space between him and Yuji. But in the same breath that the cursed spirit would back up, Yuji would also begin breathing. For Yuji, time would seem as if it was standing still. With his eyes locked directly onto the cursed spirit, Yuji would take one deep breath. This is when Yuji would then proceed to say, sun breathing. Third form, raging sun. As a special grade cursed spirit would finally put its foot on the floor, Yuji would already be behind the cursed spirit. And just as Yuji would exhale, the cursed spirit would burst into a beautiful orange color. In one swift move and in one swift breath, Yuji would have completely obliterated the special grade cursed spirit. With Yuji's first time getting a feel of cursed energy, his body would feel like nothing he's ever felt before. That breath that he took was different than every other breath that he's taken in his entire life. For the first time in Yuji's life, something felt complete about him. With the innate domain closing down, Megumi would realize this immediately. Being in absolute shock, he would then ask Nobara, does she think that Yuji was able to take down that special grade? As Sukuna inside of Yuji's body would only be more and more excited, seeing at what this kid could do, and couldn't be more excited to take over his body. Megumi and Nobara would finally make it upstairs and see Yuji just standing there, staring at his blade. This is where Megumi would then ask Yuji if he was okay. Yuji would then turn around and simply smile. This would creep out both Megumi and Nobara, seeing as this is the first time they've seen him make any kind of expression, with Nobara saying that she thinks Yuji hit his head fighting that special grade. A few days would go by, and this is where we see Megumi, Nobara, and Yuji sitting on the stairs together. This is where Gojo would then walk up to all three of the students. He would tell them that he needs to talk to Yuji, and that he has a special request for him. But before Yuji would go, he would be introduced to Maki, Panda, and Inumaki, with Gojo stating that this first year had taken down a special grade curse spirit, so they'd better put in extra work. With all three of them being shocked, this is when Gojo would tell Yuji to come on, because they have a mission to do. When Gojo and Yuji would finally be alone, he would tell Yuji that there is actually no special mission. He just wants to give him some special training. Seeing as that they're somewhat similar, Gojo, looking at Yuji, would realize that he unlocked a curse technique, asking him what exactly happened during that fight with the curse spirit. Yuji telling him in the moment that everything just felt right. As he was fighting the curse spirit, he just thought back on everything that happened within his life, all the bad stuff, and something just clicked inside of him. This is where Gojo would tell Yuji to show him his curse technique. With Yuji unsheathing his sword, he would take a deep breath in. Gojo, scanning Yuji, would realize something in that moment. Every time Yuji took a deep breath in, it was like the cursed energy inside of his body was growing, and at an unfathomable rate. Gojo was surprised by the sheer amount of cursed energy that this kid possessed. Gojo noting to himself that he might have even more cursed energy than Okotsu. This is when Gojo would teach Yuji about how to imbue his cursed energy into his blade, even though with his cursed technique, it seemed as if he already knew how to do it. Yuji's cursed technique allowed him to imbue his cursed energy into the blade naturally, but he didn't know how to use it without using his cursed technique. Gojo told him that he was simply going to teach him how to use cursed energy to utilize it throughout his blade without needing to use his technique. He would tell Yuji that sorcerers need to control their negative emotions so that they don't waste cursed energy, but he didn't think Yuji would have a problem with that, seeing as if Yuji barely showed any amounts of emotion at all. Gojo, during this time with Yuji, would train him on how to utilize his cursed energy and would make him fight him from time to time. While training Yuji, something would come up with Gojo where he needed to leave, but he would tell Yuji to simply keep practicing on how to utilize his cursed energy to put it inside of his blade without using or needing his technique. Yuji would simply nod, and Gojo would leave with Ijichi. This is when Gojo would sense a disturbance outside of the car, getting out and telling Ijichi to drive away. This is where the fight between Gojo and Jogo would commence, with everything going regularly until Gojo would kick Jogo into the lake. This is when he'd teleport back to where Yuji was. He would then go up to Yuji and ask him how he's doing on his training. Yuji showing him that he was able to completely and perfectly utilize his curse energy without needing his technique throughout the blade perfectly. Gojo being amazed that it took him this short amount of time to be able to do it. He would then tell Yuji, since he had completed his training, this was the perfect time for him to learn something else. He would then grab Yuji and teleport him back to where Jogo was. As Jogo would be getting up from the water, he would look up and see Gojo there with Yuji, asking him if he brought him there as a body shield, with Gojo laughing and saying he doesn't need him as a body shield because Jogo is just simply too weak for him. With Jogo hearing this, he would then explode at Gojo. Yuji feeling the cursed energy bursting off Jogo, Gojo telling him that with Yuji and Yuji alone, this is the bare minimum that he needs to reach. Yuji, not showing an ounce of emotion, would simply look at Gojo and ask him, "Would you be willing to give me a chance right now, just for me to see where I'm at?" Gojo, not expecting Yuji to ask to fight a special grade, would be caught off guard by this question. Gojo wasn't even thinking about letting Yuji fight Gojo. But now that he's here, he'd say what the hell, telling Yuji that if he needs help to just say something. Jogo, seeing that Gojo was just going to let this kid try to fight him, would be absolutely enraged. As Yuji would take a stance, he would breathe in, gripping his blade as tightly as he could, and imbuing cursed energy into the blade. As he would do so, the blade would turn a bright red color, shocking Gojo once again. It seemed like Yuji had simply concentrated a bunch of cursed energy into the blade all at once. And with how refined the cursed energy was, it seemed as if Yuji had been doing this for quite a long time. Yuji would take his stance, taking another deep breath in. Jogo would send fireflies straight at Yuji, trying to end this as quickly as possible. But just as quickly as Jogo had cast the fireflies, Yuji was already in front of him. This shocking both Gojo and Jogo. Gojo knew this kid was strong, but this was something else entirely. Without using any type of curse technique, Yuji would slash horizontally at Jogo. Jogo just narrowly dodging out the way in time. He would back up, trying to shoot a fire pillar at Yuji, but Yuji was simply unrelenting. No matter how fast Jogo thought he was, Yuji was just one step ahead of him. But at the same time, Jogo was still able to dodge and get out of the way just in time. Jogo had heard about this kid taking down a special grade curse spirit by himself, but he thought it was simply by sheer luck. And even if he did take down that curse spirit, Jogo was supposed to be on a whole nother level compared to the other special grades. Every move that Jogo would make, Yuji would dodge or parry effortlessly, as if he knew what Jogo was going to do before he even did it. Gojo also noting this down, that whatever was going on with Yuji's eyes, he was in absolute sync with everything. There wasn't one wasted movement, as Jogo would scream, saying he had enough, and that it was finally time to end this. Jogo would then scream domain expansion, Tomb of the Iron Coffin. Yuji would then look around, noticing that everything around him had changed. Gojo making sure that he got himself caught into the domain so Yuji wouldn't be in too much trouble. As both of them would be inside Jogo's domain, Yuji would then ask Gojo, "What is this?" Gojo would then explain to Yuji that this is the pinnacle that all Jujutsu sorcerers can reach, and that it's called a domain expansion. Explaining to Yuji what a domain is, and that it's weak on the outside and can be broken into easily, or be simply countered by a stronger domain. He would then ask Yuji what would he want to do right now, asking him if he needed his help or did he think he still had it. Yuji would stare at his blade, and then stare back at Jogo. He would tell Gojo about how hot it was in there, but it's exactly where Yuji needed to be. Yuji would take a deep breath in, telling Gojo that he understood everything now. And in one quick burst of movement, before Jogo could even get anything off within his own domain, Yuji would then say, "Sun breathing, dance," as Jogo in one swift movement would have his body cleaved straight in half. Jogo being absolutely perplexed that a kid like this was able to take him out this easily. Some kid that had just started had did this much damage to him. As fast as Jogo had opened his domain, it was closed. This is where Gojo would think that this kid was absolutely incredible. If given a few months' time, he could be up there with him, and he couldn't wait to train this kid even more. As the fight between Yuji and Jogo would come to its conclusion, seeing as Gojo told Yuji to not kill Jogo, Gojo would try to walk over to Jogo to ask him some questions. But just as they were about to interrogate Jogo, another cursed spirit would intervene, throwing a bed of flowers onto the floor, making Gojo lose his battle drive. However, Yuji, on the other hand, would lock onto the other cursed spirit immediately. Hanami being absolutely surprised that that didn't work on him. Even though Yuji knew that they needed to interrogate this cursed spirit, he also didn't want the cursed spirit getting away. So before Hanami could grab Jogo and run away, Yuji would finish off Jogo in one quick swift movement. Hanami being visibly upset, with Yuji being confused because he didn't think cursed spirits were able to feel any type of emotion at all. The other cursed spirit would simply vanish. Gojo congratulating Yuji on taking down yet another special grade cursed spirit and telling him that this time he really does have another mission for him. But I think that's where I'm going to end off part 1. Let me know what you think. Tell me if you enjoyed it, if you didn't. And yeah, thanks for listening.